Whether it's something like Star Wars being inspired by the hero with 1,000 faces, or Club Penguin being inspired by Call of Duty, some of the best media franchises became popular because they were able to take inspiration from something that already exists and turn it into something new and unique. Halo's never been secretive when borrowing inspiration from other franchises. So what was it that actually inspired Halo and inspired a lot of the main things that we see in these Halo games? But before we get into it, what if Master Chief got fired from the UNSC for crashing one too many vehicles, and he had to open up a restaurant under the Master Chef persona in order to pay his bills? Well, he would probably need a website to promote his new business, and of course, he would likely use Squarespace to create it. In case you don't know about Squarespace yet, they are the best all-in-one website building and hosting tool out there, and they sponsored this video like they have many other videos before, and of course, you guys can learn more about Squarespace at the end of this video, but huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. And who knows, had Bungie not taken some level of inspiration from different franchises, we likely wouldn't have the expansive universe filled with lore and visuals that immerse players in a way that makes fans want to explore and learn about the ever-growing Halo universe like we do today. Going all the way back to the beginning of Halo is really interesting. Master Chief's design obviously was inspired by the idea of having a super soldier who could go to space and still not suffocate in outer space. And while of course we can look to Bungie's earlier game Marathon as some level of inspiration, it'd be really difficult to argue that Bungie didn't draw some serious inspiration from the Gundam franchise, which was popular in Japan since 1979. Gundam was hugely popular overseas, and whether it was movies, manga, novels, or whatever else there was under this franchise, there was a huge array of different looking mechs that were controlled by pilots, and they looked really cool. Matter of fact, back in 1998, freelance illustrator and graphic artist Lorraine McLeese was employed by Bungie to work on Oni before shifting into concept illustrations for what would become Halo. And in an interview for the Great Journey art book, McLeese actually mentioned that some of the design directions were inspired by the Gundam franchise, specifically the film Mobile Suit Gundam. And of course, outside of just that, Bungie didn't really go into any more specifics as to what specifically led to the creation of the Master Chief's design, but if we look through some Gundam designs, there is a specific Gundam called RGM-79S GM Spartan, which definitely caught our eye. Not only can you see similarities to how the Master Chief would end up looking, but the fact that the character is also named Spartan is a really cool homage from Bungie, or an extremely interesting coincidence if it wasn't intentional. Not only does the Spartan Gundam pop out with similar colors and helmet design to what Chief would end up having, but other Gundams or Japanese series that were inspired by Gundam hype may have also served as some inspiration for later armor permutations and design approaches when it comes to Halo. We'd even go as far to argue that some of Master Chief's backstory and the idea of these soldiers being known as Spartans might have been derived from that Gundam naming, which would be really cool because it is possible that the backstory to the Spartan program derived from some of the etymology that goes into the word Spartan itself, where in ancient Greece, young kids were taken and trained to be fighting soldiers, much like the backstory to what we see the Spartan program having in the book Fall of Reach that released prior to Halo Combat Evolve even releasing. We just think it's really cool how Bungie took an awesome name like Spartan, which was the inspiration for an aesthetic design, and then dug into the historical context of the word and created some really cool parallels for their own extended universe. Also, did you guys know that Master Chief's real name isn't in fact Halo? Yeah, not sure if you guys knew that. It's actually this big ring world that exists in the Halo universe, which aesthetically is likely inspired by a sci-fi book franchise called Ringworld, which was written by Larry Niven. The book actually released all the way back in 1970, but the various book cover arts that this book has had over the years definitely share some massive similarities as to how the Halo rings would end up looking from space or when standing on the surface of the construct. We've seen ring worlds exist in various forms of media, but it is really cool to see that there was likely a specific thing that pointed down this road that led to this idea being essentially the name of the franchise. Another interesting thing is that when you start off Halo on the Pillar of Autumn, it's a really unique choice if you think about it. Not only would it serve as an awesome way to juxtapose the close quarter space battle to a brand new large ring world that players can explore, but a lot of elements introduced while you're on the Pillar of Autumn are actually drawn from various sci-fi media. The Aliens franchise definitely served as a major medium for Halo inspiration. Matter of fact, the early conceptual design of the elites strongly resembles xenomorphs just a little bit. Sergeant Johnson clearly was inspired by the Aliens character Sergeant Apone, and they even share this identical line.
Hit 'em, Marines! Go, go, go! The Corps ain't paying us by the hour!
Also, little things like in Aliens, Marines have digital ammo counters, which is one of the iconic features put on the assault rifle in CE. A lot of the spaceships, vehicles, Marine uniforms share a lot of similarities to the Alien franchise as well. We could even argue that the Flood draws some inspiration from facehuggers, but we could also argue that some of these inspirations could have been taken from other games like the first Half-Life game or even Doom. However, where we think the Flood most likely attributes its original design from is actually from another sci-fi novel known as The Vang. Now, this series was released in the late 80s, and you can even see from the cover art, there's definitely a lot of similarities between the way the Flood looks in Halo and what we see in The Vang. Matter of fact, in an old interview, Jason Jones actually stated at one point that the Vang book Starhammer was one of the most important literary influences to the Halo games. And from what we can understand, Starhammer is actually a weapon in this book series of mass destruction that gets explored in the first book, and in the second book, it's revealed that the Vang, which is the Flood-like species, actually got destroyed by it almost completely once before. It kind of is responsible for this cataclysmic type weaponry that we see the Halo rings being capable of in the Halo franchise. Now, we could go on for an entire video-length video on just some of the biblical analogies in the Halo franchise, but one that's most notable and easy to understand is this analogy between the Flood, Ark, the Covenant, and humanity, between the Bible and then the Halo equivalent of the Flood, the Ark, the Covenant, and humanity. Essentially, after the Noah's Ark story in the Bible, when God floods the earth and kills everyone except Noah's family, God makes a promise, also known as a covenant, between the human race, through Noah, that never again shall a flood destroy all. Now, besides the literary inclusions of these terms being staples in the Halo universe, and while terms like the Covenant, the Flood, and the Ark are major plot points throughout the Halo franchise, there's a lot of little subtleties that come up that are really interesting parallels. Like, for instance, part of the great journey that the Covenant so adamantly believes in is that they must activate the Halo installations or the Halo array to prevent the Flood from destroying all. Of course, that also includes literally everyone getting wiped off the face of the universe, but it's just interesting that this faction called the Covenant is kind of in line with this promise that we see in the Bible. And it's just this really interesting literary allegory that Bungie implemented here. We also think that there's some interesting points to the fact that only a human can actually activate the Halo array, and the Covenant isn't capable of doing it without the human, kind of implying this contractual promise between God and Noah, or in the case of Halo, the Forerunners with their Halo arrays, and humanity, where that these things can only occur with obvious assistance between both parties working. The Covenant actually can't do anything unless both parties are involved. And that's kind of a unique element that they didn't have to pay attention to when writing out the story, but the fact that they went that extra mile in kind of expanding the universe in that way is something we thought was really unique. Interestingly enough, Cortana is another character that has some more vague and unique sources behind her conception for inspiration when they were designing this character. As it turns out, the name Cortana is actually derived from the British ceremonial sword Cortana. This is actually something that Bungie had done previously in Marathon 2 Durandal, where one of the AI characters was named Durandal, which was also named after a French legendary sword. Interestingly enough though, the original face of Cortana in the original Halo Halo CE design was actually based off of the ancient Egyptian queen Nefertiti, which is actually one of the most famous ancient Egyptian art pieces that is still around today. And you can also get it in Animal Crossing for your museum. I still play way too much Animal Crossing to know that. We just think it's really cool to take a look at some of the awesome things that Bungie were able to do when making Halo, and some of the awesome elements that they took from when crafting this universe that made Halo what it is today, and made it a universe that we really care about. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. As we said earlier, Squarespace is the best website building and hosting service out there. They have a ton of features provided in one really easy to use online tool. If you've never created a website, there are a ton of website designs for you to pick that are easy to customize and offer a lot of different options for whatever type of website you are trying to create. You can customize all the elements of your website with a few easy clicks and make it look unique and shape it in the way to best represent your website or whatever you're trying to show off. Once you have the website set up, you can easily see who is visiting your site through their analytics feature, and there's a ton of details that you can learn about who your audience is, like where they're from, what kind of content they click the most, and much more. Understanding this data is really helpful when you're trying to grow your website and your audience, and Squarespace makes it as easy as possible. Now, if you want to stand out fully with your website, you definitely also need a unique domain, and Squarespace either lets you bring your already owned domain or lets you purchase a domain directly through them. And if you want to save on your first purchase of a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/RocketSloth and get 10% off your first purchase or a website domain using code RocketSloth. But hey, after all of that, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos just like this one, and you won't miss anything we upload, even if YouTube's acting all whack. Also, if you want to, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Rocket Elijah, or you can follow Luke at Rocket Sloth Luke. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye, guys.